I never told anyone what it cost me to stay quiet, not even the man I stayed quiet for. Nia watched the lawyer place Julian's signature on the table.
Nia, look at this. It is at Mercer Holdings, Household Operations Manager. I think you should apply. This could be your chance.
His name, his handwriting, the date proving he had known the truth for 5 years and 8 months. And when the lawyer finished, she walked toward her husband, ready to hear there had been some mistake, ready to hear anything that could save the man she had loved in secret. But Julian looked at her and said, "I was going to tell you. I was only waiting for the right time." Nia stared at him. "You had almost 6 years." Then the lawyer opened the final page of the will. The woman they had sent to eat in the kitchen now owned 52% of the Mercer empire. And Nia stood there, given a fortune, and robbed of a marriage in the same breath, because the will had finally given her a seat at the table. But the truth had taken away the man she thought would sit beside her. Now let me ask you something. How long can a woman keep calling something love when she is the only one being asked to disappear for it? Nia had slept beside Julian Mercer as his wife. She had cared for his home. She had helped raise his daughter. She had helped save his company. But whenever his family came to dinner, Julian sent her to the kitchen and called her Miss Brooks. He told her it was temporary. He told her it was protection. He told her powerful people had to make painful choices. What he never told her was that the danger had ended before the first year of their marriage was over. And by the time the will was read, the question was no longer whether Nia had loved him. The question was what his love had cost her. Before we go back to where it all began, let me speak to the women listening who have been strong for everybody else today and still found a little time for themselves. You are welcome here. Subscribe to Consequential Stories with Benjamin and write "Still Standing" in the comments with your city, state, or island. Because sometimes a story does more than entertain you. Sometimes it reminds you that surviving quietly does not mean you were never wounded. And Nia Brooks had been surviving quietly for a long time before she ever met Julian Mercer. 6 years earlier, Nia lived in a second-floor apartment on the south side of Chicago, in a building where the radiators knocked through the night and the kitchen window refused to close properly in winter. It was not the life she had planned. At 34, Nia had once been the kind of woman companies recruited before she finished an interview. She could walk into a room full of numbers and notice what everyone else had missed. A delayed shipment, an overpriced contract, a department losing money because nobody had asked the right question. She had studied operations management, worked her way into a respected consulting firm, and built a reputation for fixing expensive problems without making noise about it. Then her mother got sick. There had been no dramatic decision, no speech, no family meeting, just one phone call from a doctor, followed by a second call, then hospital visits, medication schedules, insurance forms, and the slow rearranging of one woman's life around another woman's need. Nia left her job because her mother needed care and because there was nobody else to give it. She told herself it would be for a few months. A few months became almost 3 years. By the time her mother passed away, Nia had lost more than a parent. She had lost time. Professional connections had gone cold. Former colleagues had moved ahead. The savings she once felt proud of had been swallowed by bills that kept arriving even after the person they belonged to was gone. One Tuesday morning, Nia sat at her small kitchen table with a mug of coffee she had reheated twice and a stack of envelopes she had stopped opening immediately. Her friend Denise stood near the counter, holding a piece of toast. "You need to eat something," Denise said. "I'm drinking coffee." "That is not food. It has beans in it." Denise looked at her. Nia took the toast. "There. Happy?" "No, but less irritated." Denise had been Nia's friend since college, which meant she had earned the right to be honest without asking permission first. She sat across from Nia and tapped the printed job listing between them. "This is not what you used to do," Denise said. "I know. It says Household Operations Manager. I can read. It also says temporary. Temporary is not a disease. Nia." Nia leaned back in her chair. The listing came through a placement agency that specialized in private estates. The job involved managing schedules, deliveries, staff access, household inventory, and daily operations at a large property outside the city. The pay was better than most entry-level corporate positions. The contract was 3 months. The employer was listed only as Mercer Holdings. Denise lowered her voice. "You know which Mercer that is, right? There are many Mercers." "Not in Chicago with a private estate and a holding company." Nia looked down at the page again. "Julian Mercer. Hotels. Luxury residences. A company worth more money than Nia could picture without becoming annoyed. His face appeared often enough in business magazines. Tall, controlled, always photographed in dark suits with the expression of a man who had never been made to wait in a government office. Nia folded the listing once. It is a job. It is a billionaire's house. Still a house. And he is a widower. Still not relevant. Denise studied her face. "You have not dated anybody since your mother got sick. I am applying to organize deliveries, not marry the man. I did not say marry. You were about to. I was about to say, be careful." Nia smiled faintly. "That is why I keep you around." "No, you keep me around because I bring groceries." "That too." The Mercer estate stood behind iron gates and a stretch of carefully arranged trees. Nia arrived 10 minutes early for her interview. The house itself was not loud. That surprised her. It was large enough to impress anybody who cared about size, but the rooms were restrained. Cream walls. Dark wood. Long windows. A woman in her late 60s met Nia near the service entrance. She wore a pale blue blouse, an apron, and the calm expression of someone who had seen wealthy people behave badly and survived all of them. "You must be Miss Brooks," she said. "Nia is fine. I'm Evelyn Price. I run the kitchen, which means I know more than everybody and get blamed before anybody." Nia smiled. "I think I am going to like you." Most sensible people do. Evelyn led her through the kitchen. It was warm and bright, with copper pans hanging above a wide center island. Unlike the polished rooms Nia had passed on her way inside, the kitchen felt alive. "Mr. Mercer is finishing a call," Evelyn said. "Of course he is." Evelyn glanced at her. "You say that like you already know him. I know men who make other people wait because they believe being busy is a personality." Evelyn's mouth twitched. "Careful, I may hire you myself." A small girl sat at the far end of the island with colored pencils arranged in neat rows. She wore a yellow cardigan and had her attention fixed on a drawing. Nia did not stare. The placement agent had told her Julian had a 5-year-old daughter named Sophie. She had also been told Sophie spoke very little. Nia understood the instruction beneath the information. Do not push. Do not turn the child into a subject because adults were uncomfortable with silence. As Nia passed, one of the yellow pencils rolled from the island and landed near her shoe. She picked it up and placed it gently beside the others. Sophie looked at her. Nia nodded once. "Yellow is important," she said. Sophie looked back at the drawing. No answer. Nia continued walking. Evelyn noticed. Most adults, when faced with a quiet child, immediately tried to fill the space. They asked too many questions. They raised their voices. They performed cheerfulness like noise could unlock a person. Nia had simply returned the pencil. A few minutes later, Julian Mercer entered the kitchen. He was not wearing a jacket. His white shirt sleeves were folded to his forearms, and his phone remained in one hand. He looked exactly like his photographs and nothing like them. In person, he looked tired, like a man who carried too much without letting anybody see him adjust the weight. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming. Thank you for eventually joining us." Evelyn turned away quickly, pretending to inspect a pot. Julian's eyes rested on Nia for half a second longer than politeness required. Then he placed his phone face down on the counter. "My call ran over. I assumed." "You do not sound surprised. I have worked with executives. Is that a warning?" "It depends on the executive." Something moved briefly in his expression. Not quite amusement. He gestured toward the breakfast room. "We can talk in there." Nia followed him. The interview began formally. Julian asked about her experience. Nia explained her corporate background, her years away from work, and the care she had given her mother. She did not apologize for the gap in her resume. Julian noticed that. "What made you apply for household management?" he asked. "Work is work." That is a diplomatic answer. It is an honest one. "You were on track for senior operations." "I was. And now you are interviewing to manage deliveries and domestic schedules. Are deliveries and domestic schedules beneath me?" "I did not say that." "You almost did." Julian leaned back slightly. "No, I was trying to understand whether you would be satisfied here." Nia considered him. "I do not expect a temporary contract to satisfy my entire life." "That sounds practical." "It is. And after 3 months, I find the next thing." "You sound certain." "I have had practice." Julian looked down at her resume. The silence stretched. Nia did not rush to fill it. Finally, he said, "The position also involves coordinating my daughter's schedule. I was told she has tutors, activities, medical appointments, and school arrangements. Does she have a say in any of them?" Julian looked up. "What? You listed everything arranged around her. I asked whether she has a say." "She is 5. 5-year-olds still have preferences." "This role is not childcare." "I know." "Then why ask?" "Because people cooperate better when they are treated like people." Julian's face became still. For the first time, Nia wondered whether she had pushed too far. She needed the job. Pride did not pay bills. But the house still made her uneasy. The rooms were beautiful, yet they did not feel inhabited. Julian closed the folder. "You are direct." "I have been called worse. I am sure." Nia stood. "If you want someone who agrees with everything you say, I am probably not the right person. I did not dismiss you." "No, but you closed the folder." "I finished reading it." "That is not the same thing?" "No." Julian stood too. He was taller than she expected. Nia disliked that she noticed. The door to the breakfast room opened. Sophie stood there holding the yellow pencil. She walked toward Nia and held it out. Nia looked at the pencil, then at the child. "You want me to have it?" Sophie nodded. Julian went very quiet. Nia accepted the pencil carefully. "Thank you." Sophie turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Nia watched her go, then looked at Julian. He was still staring at the doorway. "What just happened?" Nia asked. Julian took a moment before answering. "She does not usually give things to people. Maybe she has too many yellow pencils." His eyes shifted back to her. That almost smile appeared again. "Can you start Monday?" Nia blinked. "That is your hiring process?" "No. It seems short. It usually is not. You have not checked my references." "I will." "You have not discussed salary." The agency already gave you the range. The top of the range. Julian raised an eyebrow. You negotiate before accepting? I negotiate before regretting. For the first time, he smiled properly. It changed his face more than Nia wanted it to. Top of the range, he said. Monday at 8. 7:30. I do not begin work before sunrise for rich people. It will be daylight. 8. 7:45. Nia held his gaze. Done. Evelyn later told her Julian had interviewed 9 candidates. Nia was the only one Sophie had approached. But that was not why Nia returned on Monday. She returned because the salary would clear 2 overdue bills, because the contract gave her time to rebuild, because 3 months felt manageable, and because she had learned that life sometimes opened a door without explaining what waited behind it. On her first morning, Nia arrived at 7:43. Julian was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading from a tablet. He looked at the clock. You are early. You are still annoying. Evelyn laughed from the stove. Sophie sat at the island, drawing a row of small houses. Nia placed the yellow pencil beside her. I borrowed this, she said. I thought you might need it back. Sophie looked at the pencil. Then she pushed a clean sheet of paper toward Nia. Nia sat. You want me to draw? Sophie nodded. I should warn you. I am not good. Sophie waited. Nia picked up the pencil and drew a sun. It was uneven. The lines came out crooked. Sophie studied it with serious attention. Nia added a small cloud, then a house, then another smaller house beside it. Sophie took the pencil from her and drew a door connecting the two. Julian watched from across the room. Nia felt his eyes and ignored them. For the first several weeks, she treated the Mercer estate like any operation that needed structure. She reorganized delivery windows so trucks stopped arriving during Sophie's breakfast. She discovered the household was paying 3 vendors for the same floral service. She changed the maintenance schedule after learning staff had been waiting until problems became urgent because Julian disliked being interrupted. She created a central calendar accessible to everyone who actually needed it. Within a month, the house ran more smoothly. Within 2 months, Julian began asking her opinion on matters outside her contract, and Sophie began waiting for her each morning with 2 sheets of paper instead of 1. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden transformation. Just small choices repeated until the house began to feel different. Julian came home before dinner twice in 1 week, then 3 times. He stopped taking business calls at the table when Sophie was present. He learned how to sit through a quiet meal without checking whether silence meant something was wrong. One evening, Nia found him in the kitchen, attempting to make grilled cheese. The bread was black around the edges. She stood in the doorway. Is this a business strategy? Julian looked at the pan. It is dinner. For whom? Sophie. Do you dislike her? He exhaled. I can manage a company with 19,000 employees. Bread does not respect titles. I am noticing. Nia crossed the kitchen and lowered the heat. You cannot rush it. I do not rush. You tried to cook it in 40 seconds. I was being efficient. You were burning both sides at once. He looked at her. That sounds efficient. Nia laughed before she could stop herself. Julian went still. Not because the laugh was extraordinary, because he had not heard it before. Nia noticed the way he was looking at her and cleared her throat. Move. He stepped aside. She prepared another sandwich. Julian stayed beside her instead of leaving. You were right, he said. About the bread? About Sophie having a say. Nia glanced at him. She told me she hates the violin. She did? She wrote it down. She has had lessons for a year. She has hated them for 11 months. Julian looked toward the hallway. I thought structure would help. Structure helps when it supports a person, not when it replaces listening. He absorbed that without defending himself. That was the first thing Nia respected about him. Julian did not enjoy being corrected, but sometimes, when the truth reached him, he changed. The next day, the violin teacher did not return. Sophie spent the hour in the garden with paints. 2 weeks later, she laughed when Julian spilled blue water across his shirt. The sound stopped everyone in the room. Julian looked at his daughter. Sophie looked surprised by herself. Nia did not turn the moment into an event. She handed Julian a towel and said, "Blue suits you." Sophie laughed again. That evening, after Sophie went upstairs, Julian found Nia in the kitchen checking invoices. "Thank you," he said. Nia kept reading. "For the towel? For knowing when not to make something bigger than it was." She looked up. It was already big enough. He stood across from her, both hands resting on the back of a chair. The kitchen lights were low. Rain touched the windows softly. For once, Julian had no phone in sight. "You are different from the people who usually come into this house," he said. "That sounds like a complaint. It is not. What are they like? They either need something from me or want me to believe they do not. And what do you think I need? The job. I already have it. Then perhaps nothing." Nia looked at him for a long moment. "That might be the first honest thing you have said to me." His eyebrows lifted. "I am honest. You are controlled. That is not the same as dishonest." "It can be." Julian pulled out the chair across from her and sat. Nia went back to the invoices. He did not leave. After a while, he said, "Why did you really give up your career?" "I told you. My mother needed me." "That explains why you left, not why you never went back." Nia's hand paused over the paper. The question was too close. She could have told him it was none of his business. She almost did. Instead, she said, "Sometimes life does not wait for you to become ready again." Julian nodded slowly. "My wife died on a Tuesday." Nia looked at him. He had never spoken about her. Not to Nia. Not once. "The day before, I was in London," he continued. "I almost stayed another night. There was a meeting." "But you came home." "Yes." The word carried more weight than the sentence before it. Nia did not ask how his wife died. She did not ask what he wished he had done differently. She let him choose what came next. Julian looked toward the dark hallway. "People kept telling me I was lucky I came back in time. Were you?" "I do not know." Nia closed the folder in front of her. "Maybe lucky is not the word." "No." They sat quietly. It was not romantic. Not yet. It was simply two people at a kitchen table, both familiar with the way grief could rearrange a life. But something began there. Something neither of them named. The next morning, Sophie entered the kitchen while Nia was cutting fruit. She placed a drawing on the counter. 3 figures stood beneath a yellow sun. One small, one tall. One with hair drawn in careful black loops. Nia stared at it. Sophie pointed to the figures one by one. "Daddy," her voice was soft. Then she pointed to herself. "Sophie." Finally, she touched the third figure. "Nia." Julian stood in the doorway. The coffee cup in his hand lowered slowly. Nia looked at Sophie. "Good morning," she said gently. Sophie smiled. And Julian, who had spent months believing money could bring every expert his daughter needed into the house, finally understood that the woman standing in his kitchen had done something none of them could do. She had not forced Sophie to return to the world. She had simply made the world feel safe enough to speak to again. That was the morning Julian Mercer began looking at Nia Brooks as more than the woman who managed his home. And it was the morning Nia should have understood that being needed, can feel dangerously close to being loved, especially to a woman who had spent years proving her worth by staying. After Sophie began speaking again, the Mercer house changed in ways nobody announced. Her voice did not suddenly fill every room. She used it carefully. Some mornings she spoke only to Nia. Some evenings she answered Julian with 1 or 2 words, then returned to her drawings. But Julian treated every word as something precious without making Sophie feel watched. That part mattered. Nia had warned him not to turn his daughter's progress into a performance. "Do not call everybody every time she says something," Nia told him one morning. Julian looked offended. "I do not call everybody. You called your father, your assistant, and her teacher because she asked for orange juice. She had not asked me for anything in months. And now she may stop asking if every request becomes breaking news." Julian stared at her. Nia raised one eyebrow. He put his phone back into his pocket. "Fine. Good. I was not going to call anyone. You were holding the phone. I hold it often. That is part of your problem." Sophie looked between them from the kitchen island. Then she said, "Nia is right." Julian turned slowly toward his daughter. Sophie continued coloring as if she had not just chosen a side. Nia pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. Julian pointed at her. "Do not encourage this." "I did not say anything." "Your face said plenty." That became the rhythm of the house. Nia challenged him. Julian resisted. Sophie observed. Then, more often than Julian cared to admit, Nia turned out to be right. When Nia's 3-month contract neared its end, Julian called her into his home office. She stood near the desk while he finished reading an email. She waited 30 seconds, then 1 minute. Then she reached across the desk and lowered the screen of his laptop. Julian looked up. "I was reading that. You asked me to come in. I needed 1 moment. You have had 3. 3 minutes? 3 months." Julian leaned back. Nia folded her arms. "If this is about extending the contract, say it before I accept another position." "You have another position?" "I have interviews." His expression changed. It was small. A tightening around the mouth. A brief stillness in his shoulders. But Nia had spent 3 months learning how Julian Mercer hid emotion inside posture. "With whom?" he asked. "That is not relevant." "It is relevant if they are competing with my offer." "You have not made an offer." "I am about to." "Then you should probably make it." He stood and walked around the desk. "I want you to remain permanently." "As household operations manager?" "Yes." "At the same salary?" "No." "Good answer." He named a figure. Nia did not react immediately, though the number was higher than she had expected. It would clear the remainder of her mother's medical debt within a year. It would allow her to save again. It would give her breathing room she had not felt in a long time. Julian watched her carefully. There would also be full benefits, he said, retirement contributions, paid leave, and a housing allowance if you want to move closer. "I do not want to live on the estate. I did not ask you to. You were going to." "I was considering offering the guest cottage. That is living on the estate. It has a separate entrance. It is still inside your gates." His mouth shifted. "You make generosity difficult. I make conditions visible." "There are no conditions. There are always conditions. Some people simply do not read them until later." Julian studied her face. "All right, no cottage. And my role needs to be clearly defined." "It already is." "No, it is not. You ask me about staffing, deliveries, Sophie's schedule, household accounts, and sometimes hotel operations because you forget where your company ends and your life begins." "I do not forget. You sent me occupancy reports at 11 last night. You answered. That is not proof you should have sent them. It is proof you had useful thoughts. Nia stepped closer to the desk. If you want business consulting, put it in the contract and pay me for it. Julian's eyes held hers. You negotiate like you expect me to say no. I negotiate like I know what yes should cost. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Julian nodded. Draft the changes. Nia blinked. You want me to draft my own contract? You are going to rewrite whatever I give you anyway. That is true. I know. The new agreement named her household operations director and allowed her to consult on selected Mercer properties for additional compensation. She maintained her own apartment. She controlled her schedule. And when Julian asked her to dinner 2 weeks later, she reminded him that she worked for him. I am aware, he said. That creates a problem. It creates paperwork. It creates a power imbalance. I can transfer your reporting line to my chief of staff. You own the company that employs your chief of staff. I can place the household contract under an independent management agency. You would still own the house. Julian looked at her from across the kitchen table. It was nearly 10 at night. Sophie was upstairs. Evelyn had gone home. Only one lamp remained on near the pantry, casting a soft circle of light over the room. Are you telling me no? He asked. I am telling you that I do not want to wake up one morning and wonder whether I said yes, because refusing you felt expensive. The honesty settled between them. Julian did not defend himself. He looked down at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. What would make it safe enough for you to choose freely? Nia had not expected that question. Most powerful men believed good intentions canceled out power. Julian, for all his control, at least seemed capable of recognizing that his position changed the meaning of every invitation. She sat across from him. You stop being involved in my employment. Completely? Yes. The contract goes through an independent estate management company. My performance reviews do not come from you. My salary cannot be changed by you. If the relationship ends, my work does not automatically end with it. Julian considered this. And after that? After that, you ask me again. He nodded once. 3 weeks later, the new structure was complete. Julian showed her the signed documents. Nia read every page. Then she looked up. You actually did it. You sound surprised. I am. That is insulting. It is honest. He stood in the doorway of her office, hands in his pockets. Nia, yes? Will you have dinner with me? She made him wait. Not long. Just long enough to remind them both that the answer belonged to her. Yes. Their first dinner was not held at one of Julian's hotels. Nia refused. I do not want a chef standing 3 feet away pretending not to know your name, she told him. They went instead to a small Caribbean restaurant Denise had recommended. The tables were close together. The music was low. Nobody cared who Julian was. At least, nobody behaved as if they did. Nia ordered curry goat. Julian ordered what she ordered, because he had spent too long reading the menu and refused to admit he did not recognize half of it. She noticed after the first bite. You copied me. I made an informed selection. You waited until I ordered. That was part of the information. You run hotels in 23 countries. 26. And you are afraid of a menu. I was not afraid. You looked concerned. The descriptions were limited. It is food, Julian, not a merger. He smiled. You enjoy this. What? Watching me struggle. You struggle so elegantly. It would be rude not to appreciate it. The date lasted 3 hours. They spoke about things that did not fit inside the Mercer estate. Nia told him about her mother. Not the hospital years, but the woman before the illness. Her mother sang while cleaning and always forgot the second verse of every song. She believed every guest should leave with food, whether they wanted it or not. She had once returned a sofa because the salesperson insulted the delivery driver. Julian listened without checking his phone. He told Nia about growing up under Theodore Mercer's expectations. Success was noticed only long enough for the next demand to replace it. Mistakes became family history. Weakness became information someone might use later. "Is that why you control everything?" Nia asked. "I do not control everything. You scheduled this date through your assistant. She made the reservation. You sent her 3 backup restaurants. One must prepare. For dinner? For disappointment." The answer came lightly, but Nia heard the truth inside it. She did not reach for his hand. She did not soften the moment for him. She simply said, "You cannot prepare so carefully that nothing real can reach you." Julian looked at her for a long time. "I am beginning to understand that." Their relationship grew in private but not secretly. Not yet. Evelyn knew. Denise knew. Julian's chief of staff knew because Julian began leaving work before midnight. Sophie knew before either adult admitted it. One Saturday morning, she walked into the kitchen while Julian was standing too close to Nia near the coffee machine. Sophie looked at him, then at Nia, then back at him. "Are you going to kiss her?" Julian nearly dropped his cup. Nia turned away, laughing. "Sophie," he said. "What?" "That is a private question. You are in the kitchen." Nia placed both hands on the counter. "She has a point." Julian gave her a look. Sophie waited. Julian cleared his throat. "I had not decided." Nia turned toward him. "You had not decided?" "I was speaking carefully." "You were speaking badly." Sophie sighed. "You take too long." Then she walked out. Julian stared after her. Nia shook her head. "She is right about that too." He looked back at Nia. "About what?" "You take too long." This time, when he stepped closer, Nia did not move away. The kiss was gentle, almost cautious. Julian touched her as if asking a question he was afraid to speak aloud. Nia answered by placing her hand against his chest. For a man who negotiated without hesitation, Julian loved carefully at first. He asked before entering her apartment. He remembered the dates connected to her mother. He never sent expensive flowers because Nia had once told him large arrangements looked like apologies before anybody had done something wrong. Instead, he brought her bread from a bakery she liked. He sat on her old sofa even though one cushion sank lower than the other. He learned to leave his phone face down. Nia learned that Julian drank water when anxious but forgot to eat. She learned that he read contracts twice and personal messages 5 times. She learned that he still kept his late wife's favorite book beside his bed, not because he was trapped in grief, but because love did not become meaningless when a person died. Nia respected that. She did not ask him to erase the life that came before her. Sophie became part of their courtship without being made responsible for it. They visited museums. They cooked badly together. They spent Sunday afternoons in the estate garden while Sophie painted and Julian pretended not to answer emails. For the first time since her mother's illness, Nia began imagining a future without immediately calculating what emergency might interrupt it. And listen, if you have ever had to stay quiet and let your actions speak because people had already decided who you were, tap the like button for Nia. Not because she needed strangers to approve of her, but because too many good women have been asked to prove their worth in rooms already benefiting from it. 10 months after Nia first walked into the Mercer house, Julian asked her to marry him. He did not arrange a public proposal. No orchestra, no photographers, no room filled with people waiting for her answer. He asked her in the kitchen, the same room where Sophie had first handed her the yellow pencil. Nia arrived one evening to find the center island covered in paper stars. They were uneven. Some had 5 points. Some had 6. One looked like a damaged circle. Sophie stood proudly beside them. Julian waited near the table, holding a small ring box. Nia stopped in the doorway. "What happened in here?" "We decorated," Sophie said. "I can see that. Daddy cut most of them. That explains a lot." Julian exhaled. "I was told they were acceptable." "They are beautiful," Nia said. Sophie smiled. Julian stepped closer. He did not kneel immediately. First, he took Nia's hand. "You walked into this house when neither of us knew how to make it feel like a home," he said. "You did not rescue us. You expected us to become better." Nia's eyes warmed. Julian continued. "You make me uncomfortable in ways I apparently need. You argue with me before breakfast. You return gifts. You insult my cooking. It deserves criticism. I am proposing." "I know. Continue." His mouth curved. Then he became serious again. "I love you. Not for what you fixed, not for what you gave us. I love the woman who would still be herself if neither of us needed anything from her." That sentence reached the part of Nia that had spent years believing usefulness was the safest form of love. Julian lowered himself onto one knee. "Nia Brooks, will you marry me?" She looked at Sophie. Sophie whispered loudly, "Say yes." Nia laughed. Then she looked at Julian. "Yes." They married 6 weeks later at a courthouse downtown. Denise attended. Evelyn attended. Julian's chief of staff served as the second adult witness. Sophie carried yellow daisies and took her responsibility seriously enough to correct the clerk when he almost placed her on the wrong side of the room. Nia wore a cream dress that reached below her knees. Julian wore a dark suit and forgot the words he had prepared. When the clerk asked for his vows, he stared at Nia and said the only sentence he could remember. "I will never make you wonder where you belong." Nia believed him. That was the part she would remember years later. Not because it was the most beautiful promise he made, because it became the one he broke most completely. After the ceremony, they ate at a small cafe near the courthouse. Sophie had too much icing on her cake. Denise made Julian promise that wealth had not damaged his ability to wash dishes. Evelyn cried into a napkin and denied it when anyone looked at her. For one afternoon, Nia's life felt simple. She was Julian's wife. Sophie called her family. There was no locked door between private love and public truth. Julian promised they would announce the marriage after he spoke with Theodore. Nia knew Theodore would be difficult. Everybody did. Theodore Mercer had built the family hotel business from 3 properties into an international empire. He remained the controlling shareholder. He had retired from daily management but still treated every major decision as something requiring his approval. Julian requested a private meeting the following morning. Nia did not attend. Julian believed it would be better if he spoke to his grandfather alone first. He returned to the estate 3 hours later. Nia was in the bedroom unpacking a small suitcase from the courthouse hotel. She heard the door open behind her. Julian did not speak. She turned. His face told her the conversation had gone badly. "What did he say?" Julian removed his jacket. "He thinks you targeted me." Nia became still. "Of course he does. He does not know you." That has never stopped wealthy men from forming opinions. Julian loosened his tie. He threatened to call an emergency shareholder meeting. "What for?" "To challenge my leadership." Can he do that? He controls enough voting shares to make it difficult. Nia sat on the edge of the bed. Julian remained standing. "What else?" she asked. He looked away. Nia knew there was more. "Julian. He said he would transfer support to Miles. Your cousin who nearly destroyed the Miami property? Yes. And the board would accept him? Some of them would accept anyone Theodore supported. Nia studied her husband's face. What else? He threatened Sophie's trust. Her expression changed. How? The trust is controlled through family appointments until she reaches adulthood. Theodore can replace me as the primary trustee if he convinces the board I made an irresponsible personal decision. Marrying me? Yes. The word sat heavily between them. Nia stood. Does he have grounds? Not strong ones. That is not what I asked. He has influence. Julian crossed the room and took both her hands. I need time. Nia looked down at their wedding rings. How much? Until the next board meeting. That is 6 weeks. I know. What exactly are you asking me to do? Keep the marriage private until I secure the votes. Nia pulled one hand free. Private from the media? From the family for now. Theodore already knows, but the others do not. Nia walked toward the window. Below them, Sophie was in the garden arranging daisies in a glass jar. She signed our marriage certificate, Nia said. What are you going to tell her? That we are protecting the family. Nia turned around. Children should not have to protect adult lies. It is not a lie. What will she call me when your relatives visit? Julian did not answer immediately. That was the first warning. Small, quiet, easy to excuse if a woman wanted badly enough to believe the man in front of her. Nia, what will she call me? Miss Brooks, only temporarily. Nia stared at him. He stepped closer. I hate asking you. But you are asking. Yes. And if I say no? Julian's face tightened. I will announce the marriage. The answer came quickly, but not quickly enough. Nia heard the hesitation before it. She imagined Miles controlling the company. Thousands of employees facing decisions made by a man who treated businesses like gambling tables. She imagined Sophie's trust becoming a weapon in a family argument. She imagined Julian fighting his grandfather immediately after promising her a life together. And because Nia had spent years believing love meant carrying what other people could not, she made the choice that felt generous. All right, she said, 6 weeks. Julian exhaled. He took her face between his hands. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. I mean it. So do I. 6 weeks. I promise. The first family dinner took place 9 days later. Theodore did not attend, but Julian's Aunt Celeste came. Miles came with his wife. 2 board members joined them. Nia was in the bedroom when Julian removed their courthouse photograph from the dresser. She watched him place it inside a drawer. Neither of them spoke. Nia took off her wedding ring. She threaded it onto a thin chain and lowered it beneath her dress. At 7 o'clock, she entered the drawing room, carrying the updated household schedule. Julian stood near the fireplace. Celeste looked Nia over. You must be the new house manager. Nia glanced at Julian. His eyes met hers. For one suspended moment, she waited for him to change his mind, to cross the room. To say, no, this is my wife. Instead, he said, this is Miss Brooks. She keeps the estate running. Celeste handed Nia her coat, not rudely. That somehow made it worse. At dinner, every chair was occupied except one. The empty seat beside Julian. Nia noticed it. Julian noticed her noticing it. He followed her into the service corridor before the first course. This is only tonight, he said quietly. You said 6 weeks. I know. And now you are reducing it to 1 night so it sounds smaller. His jaw tightened. I cannot change the situation halfway through dinner. You could change it with 1 sentence. Nia. She looked at him. He lowered his voice. Please. Eat in the kitchen tonight. The kitchen. The room where he first saw her. The room where Sophie spoke. The room where he proposed. And now, the room where his wife would be hidden while strangers sat beside him. Nia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she walked away before he could see how deeply the request had entered her. Evelyn had already placed a plate at the small wooden table near the pantry. She did not ask questions. She simply pulled out the chair. Nia sat. The sound of conversation traveled faintly through the swinging door. Laughter. Glasses touching. Julian's voice answering a question. Nia looked down at the food and realized she was no longer hungry. An hour later, after the guests left, Julian entered the kitchen. He had removed his tie. His face carried the exhausted tenderness that had made Nia trust him. He sat across from her. The untouched plate remained between them. "I am sorry," he said. Nia touched the ring beneath her dress. "You promised I would never wonder where I belonged. You belong with me, not when anybody is watching. That is not true. It was true tonight." Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "The board meeting is in 5 weeks." Nia looked at their joined hands. "And after that? We tell everyone. You promise?" "Yes." He lifted her hand to his lips. "This will never happen again." Nia wanted to believe him. So she did. The board meeting came and went. Then Julian said the company needed to close a merger first. After the merger, he said Sophie's maternal grandparents had raised questions about the trust. After those questions were resolved, the press began praising him as the devoted widower who had rebuilt his family and his company alone. Each reason sounded temporary. Each delay arrived wearing the language of responsibility. And somewhere along the way, Julian stopped saying, "when we tell them." He began saying, "when the time is right." Nia did not yet understand that the right time is often where cowards hide the truth they have already chosen not to tell. The first year passed through promises. The second passed through explanations. By the third, Nia had stopped asking Julian for dates. She measured time differently now. By family dinners. By photographs taken without her. By how quickly Julian reached for the chain beneath her dress after the last guest left, touching the hidden wedding ring, as though tenderness could excuse where he had made her hide it. In private, he remained the man she had married. He brought her coffee before she asked. He listened when she spoke about the hotels. He sat beside her in the kitchen long after the household had gone quiet. He loved her with enough warmth to make leaving feel cruel. But in public, Julian Mercer was still the grieving widower who had devoted himself to his daughter and his company. And Nia was still Miss Brooks. That contradiction did not destroy their marriage all at once. It thinned it. Quietly. One small surrender at a time. Sophie was 7 when she first called Nia Mama Nia. They were in the garden behind the estate. Sophie sat at a small table, painting yellow flowers onto a wooden box Evelyn had given her. Nia was reviewing the household calendar beside her. Julian crossed the lawn while speaking to his assistant. Sophie held up the box. "Mama Nia, look." Julian stopped. Nia's eyes lifted from the calendar. Sophie appeared unconcerned by the silence she had created. She turned the box around. "I made the flowers too big." Nia looked at the uneven yellow petals. They looked like flowers with confidence. Sophie smiled. Julian ended his call. He walked toward them and sat across from his daughter. "What did you call Nia?" Sophie dipped her brush into the paint. "Mama Nia." Julian looked at Nia. For a brief moment, she saw the same tenderness that had been in his face at the courthouse. Then caution replaced it. "You can call her that here," he said, "but when family visits, you should still say Miss Brooks." Sophie looked up. "Why?" Julian's answer took too long. Nia closed the calendar. Because your father is still working out how to explain our family, she said. Sophie considered that. Does he need help? Nia almost smiled. Julian did not. I can handle it, he said. Sophie returned to her painting. You take a long time. The words were simple. Julian heard the judgment inside them anyway. Later that evening, he found Nia in their bedroom folding clothes. You made me sound incompetent. You did that without assistance. Nia. She asked a reasonable question. She is a child. She still deserves an honest answer. Julian closed the door behind him. We have discussed this. No, you have delayed it. The company is preparing for expansion. The company is preparing for expansion. Since we married. He loosened his tie. The London acquisition affects thousands of employees. So did the merger. This is different. They are always different to you. Julian crossed the room. Nia continued folding a blouse. He touched her wrist. She stopped. I am trying to protect what we have, he said. Nia looked at his hand resting over hers. No, Julian, you are protecting the version of your life that asks nothing difficult from you. His eyes hardened slightly. That is unfair. Is it? I come home to you. In secret. You are my wife. In this room. That does not make it less real. It makes it smaller. Julian stepped back. Nia placed the blouse in the drawer and closed it. She could see that he wanted to argue. She could also see that he was tired. There was always something urgent at Mercer International. A property losing money. A board member threatening to resign. A deal requiring his personal attention. Nia had once admired the way he carried pressure. Now she wondered whether pressure had simply become the place he hid from decisions that required courage rather than control. He sat on the edge of the bed. Give me until the London acquisition closes. Nia leaned against the dresser. When? 4 months. She stared at him. Do you understand what you are asking? Yes. I do not think you do. He looked up. You are asking me to remain your wife in private and your employee in public for another 4 months. You are asking Sophie to change my name depending on who is listening. You are asking me to trust another deadline after every other one disappeared. Julian lowered his eyes. I know. No. You know the words. You do not know the cost. His voice softened. 4 months. Nia should have said no. Instead, she remembered the first year. The courthouse. The yellow flowers. The man who had changed his entire employment structure so she could choose him freely. She told herself that man was still there. All right, she said. 4 months passed. The acquisition closed. Nothing changed. By Sophie's 8th birthday, the Mercer family had perfected the performance. Nia organized the celebration. She approved the flowers. She coordinated the caterers. She arranged the guest list and corrected the seating plan twice after Celeste added people without informing anyone. The formal dining room glowed beneath 2 chandeliers. Yellow ribbons decorated the chairs because Sophie had chosen the color herself. At the center of the table sat a cake shaped like a stack of books. Nia had spent 3 evenings finding a baker who could make it without turning it into something childish. When the guests began arriving, she slipped the wedding ring from her finger and placed it beneath her dress. Marisol, the estate housekeeper, stood beside her in the service corridor. Marisol had worked at the estate for 2 years and had understood the truth within her first week. Nobody had told her. She had simply noticed that Julian looked at Nia like a husband when the family was absent, and like a careful employer when they were not. You should be in there, Marisol said. Nia adjusted a serving tray. I am working. You have been working every time they need an excuse. Nia gave her a warning look. Marisol lifted both hands. I said nothing. You said plenty. I learned from you. The guests entered the dining room. Sophie wore a yellow dress and silver shoes. She moved around the table checking the place cards. Then she stopped beside Julian's chair. The seat to his right had been assigned to Celeste. Sophie picked up the card. Celeste noticed. "What are you doing, darling?" "That is Nia's chair." The room quieted. Nia stood near the doorway. Julian was speaking with one of the board members, but he heard. Everybody heard. Sophie carried Celeste's place card to the opposite side of the table. Then she wrote Nia's name on a blank card. The letters were careful and slightly uneven. She placed it beside Julian. "There," she said. "Now it is right." Celeste laughed, not loudly, just enough to make the moment feel like something charming a child had misunderstood. "Nia is working tonight, sweetheart." Sophie looked toward Nia. "She works every night." Julian stepped closer. "Sophie, it is my birthday." "I know. I want her here." Nia watched him. She did not rescue him from the decision. She did not step forward and tell Sophie it was fine. For once, she allowed the empty chair to ask the question for her. Julian looked toward the guests, then at the place card, then at Nia. She saw the choice pass through his face, and she saw him refuse it. He picked up the chair. "Your aunt was seated here," he said. Sophie watched him move it back into position. The room resumed its conversation slowly. Nia remained in the doorway. Julian did not look at her again until the cake was served. That night, after the guests left, he entered their bedroom carrying a long velvet box. Nia was removing pins from her hair. He placed the box on the dresser. "What is that?" "Open it." She did not move. Julian opened it himself. Inside lay a diamond bracelet. It was delicate, expensive, and exactly the kind of gift Nia had once warned him against. She looked at it, then at him. "I thought you did not buy jewelry as apologies." "It is not an apology." "What is it?" "A birthday gift." "My birthday is in November." His face tightened. "Nia." She closed the box. "I do not need jewelry in rooms where I do not have a name." Julian went still. She placed the box back into his hands. "Sophie wrote my name on a card tonight," Nia said, "and you removed the chair. I was not going to announce our marriage at her birthday dinner. You did not have to announce anything. You could have let me sit." Celeste would have asked questions. Then she would have asked. The board members were there. They have seen me manage this house for years. As an employee. Nia laughed once. There was no humor in it. "That is the problem." Julian set the box down. "I am working toward a solution. You keep saying that like I am a problem to solve." "That is not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Nia nodded slowly. "Exactly." She slept facing away from him that night. The next morning, Sophie carried her breakfast plate into the kitchen and sat beside Nia at the small wooden table. Julian stood in the doorway. "Sophie, breakfast is in the dining room." "I am eating here." "Why?" She spread jam across her toast. "Nia eats here." Julian looked at Nia. Nia lifted her coffee. "She has made her choice. You should not encourage her." I did not move her plate. Sophie took a bite. Then she said, "People should eat with their family." Julian left without answering. After that, Sophie carried her dinner into the kitchen whenever Nia was excluded. She did not argue. She did not make scenes. She simply picked up her plate and changed rooms. Celeste called it a phase. Evelyn called it good sense. Julian called it inappropriate. Nia called it the most honest thing happening in the house. The kitchen staff became the people who witnessed the parts of Nia's marriage nobody else saw. Evelyn saved her the first warm plate from every formal meal. Marisol warned her when family members were approaching so she could cover the chain beneath her dress. The groundskeeper, Mr. Harris, began leaving fresh flowers near the service entrance after noticing that every arrangement in the formal rooms had been chosen by Nia, but none had ever been intended for her. They did not pity her. That would have been easier to reject. They simply treated her as if she belonged. Sometimes dignity survives because one room refuses to repeat the lie being told in another. And the Mercer kitchen became that room for Nia. It was also where she noticed the first invoice. Julian had left a stack of company files on the center island one evening. That was not unusual. The border between his office and the rest of the estate had never been firm. Nia moved the files aside while preparing the household budget. A supplier invoice slipped free. She picked it up. Mercer International had paid nearly 3 times the usual market rate for linen deliveries to 4 properties. Nia recognized the vendor name, Westbridge Hospitality Supply. She had seen it on kitchen equipment invoices at the estate. She opened the household records. The same company had charged the estate for 2 industrial refrigerators that had never arrived. Nia carried the invoice to Julian's office. He was speaking to someone in Singapore. She placed the paper on his desk and pointed to the total. Julian glanced at it, then at her. He covered the phone. "What? This invoice is wrong." "I am on a call. I can see that. I will look at it later. You have paid this company more than $2 million this quarter." Julian's attention sharpened. He ended the call. "What did you say?" Nia placed 3 more invoices beside the first. "Westbridge is overcharging the hotels and the estate." He picked up the papers. "Procurement approved these. Then procurement is either careless or involved." Julian frowned. "That is a serious accusation. It is an expensive pattern." He compared the invoices. "How did you find this?" "You left the files in my kitchen. Our kitchen." Nia looked at him. The correction came too easily for a man who still would not claim her beyond the estate walls. She let the silence answer. Julian looked away first. "I will have finance review it." Finance approved it. Then internal audit. Internal audit reports to Miles. Julian's eyes returned to hers. "What does Miles have to do with this?" "I do not know yet." "Yet?" "I want access to the supplier records." "No." Nia crossed her arms. "You consult on selected hotel operations. That does not give you authority to investigate family executives. This is not about family. It is about money leaving your company. I will handle it. Like you handled the marriage?" The words escaped before she could soften them. Julian's expression closed. "That is not fair." "Neither are these invoices." He stood. "Nia." She knew the tone. It was the voice he used in meetings when he wanted the room to understand the discussion had ended. It had never worked well on her. "You brought me into business matters when you needed answers," she said. "Do not send me back to the household because the answer is inconvenient." Julian looked down at the invoices again. Finally, he said, "What do you need?" 3 years of supplier agreements, payment schedules, property-level purchase orders, and access to the archived bids. That is a large review. So is the theft. You have not proven theft. Then let me prove I am wrong. Julian studied her. All right. The investigation began quietly. Nia visited 2 Mercer hotels under the excuse of reviewing household service standards. At a downtown property, she found storage rooms filled with low-quality linen carrying premium invoices. At another, the loading manager showed her purchase orders for equipment that had been canceled but still paid. Nia spent evenings comparing contracts in the company archive room. She She found repeated links between Westbridge and several smaller suppliers. The directors changed. The addresses changed. The payment accounts did not. All of them led back to a private investment firm partly controlled by Miles. Nia built the case piece by piece. She did not accuse him without proof. She traced every payment. She checked every date. She created a restructuring plan that would cancel the fraudulent agreements, protect the hotel staff from sudden disruption, and replace the suppliers without closing a single property. She worked at the small kitchen table after midnight. Evelyn left coffee near her elbow before going home. Marisol brought archived delivery books from the service office. Julian joined Nia on the fourth night and read the first section in silence. When he reached the end, he looked up. "How long did this take you?" "4 nights. My strategy team has been reviewing procurement for 6 months. Your strategy team was looking at totals. I followed relationships." He turned another page. "This could save the company more than $40 million over 3 years. It will save more if Miles is removed before he redirects the contracts." Julian leaned back. "You are certain he is involved?" "I am certain the companies are connected to him. Whether he arranged the fraud personally is something the board can investigate." Julian read the executive summary again. Then he looked at Nia in a way she had not seen for months, with admiration. Uncomplicated and open. This is exceptional. Nia wanted that sentence to be enough. A part of her still wanted his recognition more than she trusted it. Julian reached across the table. This may finally change everything. She did not take his hand. "How?" "When the board sees this, Theodore will understand what you bring to the family and the company." Nia's expression cooled. "I should not have to save his empire to qualify as your wife." "That is not what I meant." "Then say what you mean." Julian lowered his voice. "I will present the plan at Friday's board meeting. With your name attached." Nia studied him. "Clearly attached?" "Yes. Not hidden in the supporting documents." "No. Not mentioned after the vote. I will tell them you discovered the fraud and developed the restructuring." She held his gaze. "Promise me." "I promise." Friday morning, Nia watched the board meeting from a private conference room at the Mercer headquarters. Julian had asked her not to enter until he finished presenting the financial problem. He said the board needed to understand the seriousness before meeting the person who solved it. Nia did not like the arrangement, but her name appeared on the title page. For once, she allowed herself to believe Julian was preparing to open the door. The screen displayed the boardroom. Theodore sat near one end of the table. Miles sat 3 chairs away. Julian stood beside a large presentation screen. He explained the supplier losses. He described the shell companies. He presented the restructuring plan. Nia waited. Slide after slide passed. Her name never appeared. The title page had been changed. When Julian reached the final recommendation, one board member leaned forward. "This is impressive work, Julian." Julian paused. Nia stood in the empty conference room. This was the moment. He could still say it. He could still tell them. Julian looked toward the camera for one brief second. Then he turned back to the board. "My team and I have been developing the framework for several weeks." Nia's hand slowly left the back of the chair. The board approved the plan. Miles denied involvement and demanded an independent review, but his supplier authority was suspended. The company was protected. The employees were protected. Julian was praised for discovering the problem before it reached the press. By Monday morning, business reporters were calling him the man who had saved Mercer International from a $40 million disaster. Nia watched the interview from the kitchen. Julian stood on the television screen beneath the company logo. The reporter smiled. "How did you identify a scheme that had escaped your financial teams for years?" Julian answered carefully. Leadership means asking the questions others overlook. Those were Nia's words. She had written them in the final paragraph of her report. Evelyn turned off the television. The kitchen became quiet. Julian returned home that evening. Nia was waiting beside the small wooden table. Her report lay between them. The original title page carried her name. The board copy did not. Julian closed the kitchen door. I can explain. I am sure you can. The board would have questioned the work if they believed it came from someone outside corporate leadership. I am not outside corporate leadership when you need me to fix their mistakes. That is not what I mean. You promised. I protected the plan by putting my name on it. Nia looked at him. You protected the credit. Julian's jaw tightened. If the board had rejected the restructuring, thousands of employees could have been affected. And if you told them the truth, they would have asked who you were. Yes? They would have asked why the household operations director was reviewing company contracts. Yes. And then they would have discovered our marriage in the middle of a fraud investigation. Nia nodded slowly. There it is. What? The real problem. Julian stepped closer. Nia, you did not erase my name to save the company. You erased it because telling the truth about my work would force you to tell the truth about me. He had no answer, not one that could survive the room. Nia touched the report. You keep calling my invisibility protection because it sounds kinder than convenience. Julian lowered his eyes. I will correct the record after the investigation. Nia almost laughed. After. The word had become a room she could no longer breathe inside. Neither of them noticed Theodore standing in the open service doorway. He had arrived without calling. His driver had let him in through the side entrance after Theodore insisted he did not need an announcement. He looked from Nia to the report on the table, then to Julian. What record are you correcting? He asked. Julian turned sharply. Theodore walked into the kitchen. His eyes settled on the title page bearing Nia's name. He picked it up. He read the first line. Then the second. When he looked at his grandson again, the room felt colder. Who wrote this? Julian said nothing. Nia did not rescue him. Theodore looked down at her name once more. And for the first time since Nia entered the Mercer family, the old man was no longer looking at her as the woman who had taken something from them. He was looking at her as the woman whose work they had taken. Theodore held the report in both hands. The original title page carried Nia's name. The copy presented to the board did not. He looked at Julian first. Then he looked at Nia. Who wrote this? Julian's shoulders tightened. Nia developed the framework. The framework? The full restructuring plan, Nia said. Theodore lowered his eyes to the report again. The kitchen was quiet enough for them to hear the old clock above the pantry. How much of the investigation did you conduct? He asked. All of it. You traced the suppliers. Yes. You discovered the links to Miles. Yes. And the hotel transition plan? I wrote it. Theodore turned to Julian. You presented this to the board as your own work. I presented it as company work. That is not what I asked. Julian moved closer. The board needed to focus on the plan, not where it came from. Theodore's expression hardened. And where did it come from? Julian did not answer. Theodore placed the report on the table. It came from the woman you have allowed this family to treat like an employee. Nia went still. It was the first time Theodore had spoken plainly about what everyone in the house pretended not to notice. Julian glanced toward her. The situation is complicated. Theodore laughed once. There was no warmth in it. Complicated is the word men use when the truth makes them look small. Julian's jaw tightened. You do not know everything. I know enough to ask why this woman saved your company from your own cousin, and you rewarded her by removing her name. I protected the proposal. No, you protected yourself. Theodore's eyes moved to Nia. Did he tell you I was responsible for this arrangement? Nia looked at Julian. The question landed differently from everything before it. He told me you threatened his position, she said, and Sophie's trust. I did. Theodore did not soften it. He did not pretend he had always behaved honorably. I was angry, proud, certain I understood your intentions before I understood you. Nia folded her arms. And now? Now I understand that my grandson has been hiding behind my worst decision. Julian stepped between them slightly. This is not the time. Theodore turned on him. It was not the time 6 years ago. It was not the time after the merger. It was not the time after the custody questions ended. It was not the time when you took credit for her work. Nia watched Julian's face. Something inside her shifted. Not because Theodore had revealed the whole truth. He had not. But because Julian did not deny that the original danger had passed. Julian lowered his voice. We should discuss this privately. Theodore looked at the kitchen table. Apparently private rooms are where this family puts every truth it does not have the courage to seat at dinner. He picked up Nia's report. I am taking this. Julian reached for it. Theodore pulled it away. It has her name on it, he said. That means it is the first honest copy I have seen. He left the kitchen without another word. The side door closed behind him. Nia remained beside the table. Julian stood near the doorway. Neither spoke at first. Then Nia asked, What did he mean? Julian looked at her. You heard him. I heard him say you have been hiding behind something that no longer exists. He was angry. That is not an answer. Theodore changes his position depending on what gives him control. Did he withdraw the threat? Julian's face became unreadable. Nia knew that look. It was not confusion. It was calculation. Julian. He stopped pressing the issue directly. When? It was gradual. When? He moved toward her. Nia, this is not something we should discuss while emotions are high. She stepped back. Do not touch me until you answer. Julian stopped. The kitchen seemed suddenly smaller. When did his threat stop? He looked away. That is what I thought, Nia said. She walked past him. Nia. She did not turn around. Theodore returned 3 days later. This time, he entered through the main door. He did not ask for Julian. He asked for Nia. Evelyn found her in the pantry reviewing the following week's household schedule. Mr. Mercer wants to speak with you, Evelyn said. Which one? The one who looks like disappointment has been keeping him alive. Nia closed the folder. Where is he? The kitchen. Of course. Theodore sat at the small wooden table with the report open in front of him. Beside it rested several pages of handwritten notes. Nia took the chair across from him. You asked for me. I did. He slid one page toward her. It contained a list of hotel properties and declining occupancy rates. Why is the Atlanta property losing weekend business? Nia glanced down. The lobby renovation has been delayed twice, but that is not the real problem. What is? The surrounding area changed. The hotel still markets itself to business travelers, but the weekend demand comes from families attending events at the convention center. Theodore watched her. So the rooms are priced incorrectly. The family suites cost more than 2 connecting rooms at a newer property nearby. You know this from looking at one page? I reviewed the regional reports last month. You were not assigned to that property. No. Why review it? Because Julian sent me a staffing question and included the full report. Theodore leaned back. What would you change? Nia answered. He asked another question, then another. Supplier contracts, staff turnover, customer complaints, maintenance delays. For almost an hour, Theodore tested the edges of her knowledge. Nia never tried to impress him. When she did not know something, she said so. When his assumptions were wrong, she corrected them. When he interrupted her, she waited until he finished and continued from the same sentence. Finally, Theodore closed the file. You are not intimidated by me. I was raised by a woman who once argued with a surgeon until he apologized to a nurse. You are not the most difficult man I have met. His mouth moved slightly. It may have been the beginning of a smile.
Then it disappeared.
Why did you leave your career? My mother became ill, and after she died, I needed work. You could have returned to corporate management. I tried. What happened? Nia looked toward the window. People admire sacrifice until it creates a gap in a woman's resume. Theodore's face changed. She continued. They said they respected what I had done for my mother. Then they hired people whose careers had not paused. And Julian? He offered me a job, then took your work. Nia met his eyes. Yes. Theodore looked down at the report. He should have known better. He did know better. The old man did not defend him. That mattered more than Nia expected. Over the following weeks, Theodore began appearing wherever Nia was working. Sometimes it was the kitchen. Sometimes the estate greenhouse, where she met with the grounds team. Once it was the lobby of the downtown Mercer Hotel during a charity event. The event had been planned to raise money for women returning to work after long-term caregiving. The irony was not lost on Nia. She had suggested the program 2 years earlier. Julian's public relations team had adopted it without using her name. On the evening of the event, a delivery error left 200 guests without seating cards. The event coordinator began blaming junior staff. Nia stepped in. She reorganized the registration tables, divided the guest list by company, and redirected volunteers before the first donors entered. Within 20 minutes, the crisis had disappeared. Celeste posed for photographs beside a banner about supporting women's leadership. Nia remained near the service entrance, helping an assistant correct the final table assignments. Theodore stood across the lobby watching her. Later he approached Julian near the ballroom doors. Nia could not hear the beginning of the conversation. She heard Theodore's voice when it rose. Why is she still being introduced as household staff? Julian glanced toward Nia. Not here. Why not here? We have investors in that room. You had investors at Sophie's birthday. This is not the same. No. This is worse. Tonight's event exists because of her idea. Julian lowered his voice. The publicity surrounding my personal life affects the company. The company survived because of her work. The board is still reviewing Miles. And what does that have to do with your marriage? Everything is connected. Theodore stepped closer. The original threat no longer stands. Julian's face tightened. Nia could not hear his answer. Theodore's next words carried across the space. You have made an excuse, outlive the danger that created it. Julian looked toward Nia. Their eyes met. He knew she had heard. Nia did not walk toward them. She did not demand an explanation in the middle of the lobby. She simply turned and continued helping the assistant. But something inside her stopped waiting. That night, Theodore sat at the kitchen table while Nia reheated soup. Julian had not returned from the event. Sophie was upstairs working on a school project. Evelyn had gone home. Theodore accepted the bowl Nia placed before him. You do not have to serve me, he said. I am not serving you. I am preventing you from eating cold soup. He took a spoonful. It was a recipe that had belonged to his late wife. Nia had found it in an old kitchen book and adjusted the seasoning after Evelyn told her Theodore complained whenever anyone changed it. He tasted it again. "My wife made this." "I know." "Julian told you?" "Evelyn did." Theodore looked around the kitchen. "You know more about this family than most of the people carrying its name." "I have had 6 years to observe." The words came without bitterness. That made them heavier. Theodore set down the spoon. "Why are you still here?" Nia looked toward the ceiling. Above them were the bedrooms, the rooms where she was Julian's wife, the rooms where Sophie called for her when she needed help with a school project or could not decide which dress to wear. "Because a little girl already lost one mother," Nia said. "I could not become another woman who disappeared from her life." Theodore lowered his eyes. "You stayed for Sophie." "I stayed because I love her." "And Julian?" Nia did not answer immediately. "I love him too." That was not the question. She looked at him. Theodore held her gaze. "Did you stay because you believed him?" "At first." "And now?" Nia touched the chain beneath her blouse. "Now I do not always know whether I am staying out of love or because leaving would make 6 years feel wasted." Theodore inhaled slowly. "Time does not become valuable simply because we suffer through it." Nia almost smiled. "That sounds like something you learned late." "It is." Theodore took another spoonful of soup. Then he asked, "Has Julian ever shown you the amended trust documents?" Nia became still. "What amended documents?" Theodore looked at her. That was the moment he understood. Not suspected. Understood. Julian had not merely delayed a conversation. He had withheld proof. Nia waited. Theodore seemed to choose his next words carefully. "You should ask your husband." "I have." "Ask him again." "That is not good enough." "No," Theodore said quietly. "It is not." He stood. Nia watched him button his jacket. "What are you going to do?" Theodore looked at the small wooden table between them. "What I should have done years ago." He left before she could ask what that meant. The next morning, Theodore called his attorney. He ordered a full review of Miles' supplier relationships. He requested every version of the restructuring report. He asked for the delivery records proving when Julian received the amended trust documents. Then he began rewriting his will. Julian knew none of it. Miles noticed first. He saw Theodore's private investigator entering the company archive. He learned that old supplier accounts were being reopened. 2 days later, Miles called Celeste. They met in a private dining room at one of the Mercer hotels. "You need to get Nia out of that house," Miles said. Celeste lifted her glass. "Nia is Julian's problem. She is becoming Theodore's interest. Theodore has interests the way storms have directions. They change. This one is not changing." Miles leaned forward. "She found the supplier accounts." Celeste's expression sharpened. "You told me Julian's audit team found them." "Julian's audit team could not find the door if someone removed the sign. She found them. And Julian took the credit." "Yes." Celeste smiled faintly. "Then what exactly are you worried about?" "That Theodore knows." Celeste set down her glass. Miles continued. "If he exposes those contracts, I lose more than my board seat." "What do you want me to do?" "Remind Julian what happens when private complications become public." Celeste understood. She had spent her entire life treating reputation as a form of currency. And Nia, in her eyes, remained the kind of truth families like theirs were expected to manage quietly. Sophie was 10 when she refused to help them manage it. Her school hosted a family leadership day. Parents and guardians were invited to attend presentations. Sophie had designed a model of a small hotel using recycled materials and yellow paint. Julian rearranged 2 meetings to attend. Nia attended as well. Before they entered the auditorium, Julian crouched beside Sophie. "When your teacher introduces us, remember to say, 'Nia is your caregiver.'" Sophie looked at him. "She is not." "I know. Then why should I say it?" "Because today is about your project. We do not need questions about private family matters." Sophie held the model carefully. "Nia is my family." Julian glanced toward the parents entering the auditorium. Nia watched him. He lowered his voice. "We have discussed this." "You discussed it," Sophie said. "I listened." Then she walked inside. During the presentation, Sophie stood before the class with Julian on one side and Nia on the other. Her teacher smiled. "Would you like to introduce the adults who came with you?" Sophie pointed to Julian. "This is my father." Then she pointed to Nia. "And this is my mother, Nia." The room remained polite. No one gasped. No one demanded an explanation. A parent near the front took a photograph of Sophie beside both adults. Julian smiled through the rest of the presentation. In the car, he called his public relations director. By evening, the photograph had been removed from the school's public page. At breakfast the next morning, Julian told Sophie she had revealed information that was meant to remain private. Sophie placed her spoon beside her bowl. "Is Nia private because you love her?" Julian looked at her. "Or because you are ashamed of her?" The question entered the room and stayed there. Julian did not raise his voice. He did not punish Sophie. He simply stood and walked to the window. Nia watched him. This was another moment, another chair, another chance. He could have crossed the room and told Sophie the truth. He could have told Nia that the secrecy was over. Instead, he said, "We will discuss this after Theodore's birthday." Nia closed her eyes. After. Again. Later, Evelyn found her in the kitchen holding the hidden ring between her fingers. "You need to leave," Evelyn said. Nia looked up. "You have never said that before." I hoped he would grow brave. So did I. Evelyn sat across from her. "You are not protecting that child by letting her watch you disappear." Nia's hand closed around the ring. "If I leave, she will think another mother chose to go. And if you stay?" Nia said nothing. Evelyn leaned closer. "Staying where you are being diminished, which does not teach Sophie love. It teaches her what a woman should endure to keep it." Nia looked toward the doorway. Sophie stood there. She had heard enough. The child walked into the kitchen and opened Nia's hand. She took the ring. Then she placed it back into Nia's palm. "You should not have to wear it where nobody can see." Nia looked at her. Sophie's expression was steady, older than it had been 6 years before, but still carrying the same directness that had once handed Nia a yellow pencil. Nia closed her fingers around the ring. For the first time, leaving no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like the truth Sophie had been waiting for her to teach. Theodore's 80th birthday arrived 2 weeks later. Nia prepared the meal using recipes that had belonged to his wife. The kitchen moved around her from early morning. Evelyn supervised the sauces. Marisol checked the formal rooms. Sophie arranged yellow flowers in low glass bowls. Julian spent most of the day on calls. He and Nia had spoken only when necessary since the school event. At 6:30, Nia changed into a dark green dress. She placed the wedding ring beneath it, not because she still agreed to hide, because she intended to give it back to Julian before the night ended. The formal dining room filled with relatives, board members, and longtime friends. Theodore entered last. He walked slowly but without assistance. When he reached the table, he noticed there was no place card for Nia. His eyes moved to Julian. "Where is she sitting?" Celeste laughed lightly. "The staff have their own table." The room quieted. Nia stood near the doorway. Everyone waited for Julian. He knew the original threat was gone. He knew Theodore had spoken to her. He knew Sophie was watching. He knew this was no longer about timing. Julian looked at Nia. For 1 second, she saw the man from the courthouse. Then, fear returned. Miss Brooks understands how formal dinners work in this house, he said. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Silverware touched china. Someone adjusted a chair. Nia felt something inside her become completely still. Sophie picked up her plate. She walked past Julian without looking at him. Then she carried her dinner into the kitchen and sat at the small wooden table. If she is staff, Sophie said, then I am staff too. Theodore lowered his eyes. Not at Sophie, at Julian. Nia followed Sophie into the kitchen. She sat across from her. Neither of them ate. Julian entered moments later and closed the door behind him. Sophie, return to the dining room. No, this is my grandfather's birthday. I know. You embarrassed the family. Nia looked at him. That was the sentence that ended it. Not Miss Brooks. Not the empty chair. Not even 6 years of waiting. It was the fact that Julian entered the kitchen and worried first about embarrassment. Nia stood. Do not speak to her that way. I am trying to keep this evening from becoming a spectacle. You made it one. Nia, no. You do not get to use that tone with me tonight. Julian glanced at Sophie. Can we discuss this privately? Nia reached beneath her dress. She pulled the ring from the chain. Then she placed it on the wooden table. There has been nothing private about what you have done to me, she said. Only hidden. Julian looked at the ring. I told you I was working toward a solution. You have mistaken my patience for permission. That is not fair. 6 years, Julian. His face tightened. Everything I did was for Sophie and the company. Nia stepped closer. No, you did it because loving me privately gave you comfort, while denying me publicly cost you nothing. The kitchen fell silent. Julian looked as if she had struck him. Nia did not take the words back. Our marriage has not been protected, she said. It has been erased. She picked up her plate and carried it to the sink. Then she looked at Sophie. I am going upstairs to pack. Julian's voice dropped. You are leaving tonight? Yes. You cannot make this decision in anger. I did not make it tonight. I have been making it one dinner at a time. She left the kitchen. Theodore was waiting in the service corridor. He had heard enough. Nia walked past him without speaking. Theodore entered the kitchen and closed the door. Sophie remained seated. Julian stood beside the table, staring at the ring. Theodore looked at his grandson. Did you ever tell her? Julian did not answer. The amended trust, Theodore said. Did you ever tell your wife that I withdrew the threat? Julian's silence became a confession. Theodore's face changed. You coward. Julian looked up. It was not that simple. It was exactly that simple. You do not understand the pressure I was under. I created the pressure, then I removed it. The board was unstable. The board is always unstable. The press. Your wife sat in that kitchen while you collected praise for her work. Julian's voice hardened. I protected this family. No, she protected this family. You protected the story people told about you. Julian stepped toward him. Theodore lifted one hand. His face tightened. The color left it quickly. Sophie stood but remained beside the table. Nia, halfway up the stairs, heard something fall. She turned. Evelyn called Theodore's name from the corridor. Nia ran back toward the kitchen. Theodore had collapsed beside the chair. Julian knelt near him, calling for emergency services. Nia lowered herself beside Theodore and checked his breathing. His eyes opened briefly. They found hers. He tried to speak. Make sure you sit. His voice stopped. The sentence remained unfinished, and before Theodore Mercer could tell Nia what he had done, the truth disappeared behind the final silence of a dying man. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and coffee that had been sitting too long. Nia stood near the window with Theodore's unfinished words still moving through her mind. "Make sure you sit." Julian sat several chairs away, his elbows resting on his knees. He had not looked at her since the doctor came out. Celeste stood near the nurse's station, speaking in a low voice to Miles. Evelyn had taken Sophie back to the estate, where Marisol was keeping the evening calm and ordinary. No one in the corridor knew what to say. Theodore Mercer had spent his life controlling rooms. Now his absence controlled this one. A doctor approached Julian and spoke quietly. Julian nodded once. Then he stood. "My grandfather is gone," he said. Celeste covered her mouth. Miles lowered his head. Nia looked through the window at the dark parking lot below. She did not cry. Grief arrived differently when the person who died had once wounded you, then tried too late to correct what he had done. There was sadness. There was anger. There was the terrible weight of unfinished truth. Julian walked toward her. Gia. She did not turn immediately. When she did, his face was open in a way she had rarely seen. No businessman. No careful grandson. No man preparing the correct response. Just Julian. "I am sorry," he said. Nia held his gaze. "For what?" He swallowed. "For tonight." "Only tonight?" His eyes closed briefly. Nia nodded. "That is what I thought." She walked past him. Julian did not follow. The funeral took place 4 days later. The Mercer Chapel was filled with people who spoke about Theodore's discipline, his vision, and the empire he built. They spoke less about the cost of being loved by a man who believed control was the same as protection. Nia sat near the back. Not with the staff, not with the family. Somewhere in between. That was where the Mercers had kept her for 6 years. Close enough to serve. Too far away to belong. Sophie sat beside Julian near the front. She wore a dark dress and held a single yellow flower. When the service ended, she walked to Nia and took her hand. No one stopped her. Julian watched them from across the aisle. For once, he did not ask Sophie to change what she called Nia. He did not ask Nia to move. He simply watched as the two of them walked outside together. That evening, Nia moved out of the bedroom she had shared with Julian. She did not leave the estate yet. Theodore's attorney had notified the family that every named beneficiary must remain available for the reading of the will. Nia was surprised her name appeared anywhere in the documents. She assumed Theodore had left her an apology. Perhaps a letter. Perhaps the recipe book that belonged to his wife. She did not imagine anything more. Nia carried one suitcase into a small guest room beside the kitchen. Julian stood in the hallway. "You do not have to sleep here. I know. This room is used for temporary staff." Nia looked at him. "So was I." His face tightened. "That is not what you were. It is what you called me." "Nia?" She placed the suitcase on the bed. Julian remained in the doorway. "I should have told you sooner," he said. She turned slowly. "Sooner than when?" He looked away. Nia's voice stayed calm. "Your grandfather asked if I had seen amended trust documents. You knew exactly what he meant. The legal position was complicated. There is that word again. It was not only about the trust. No, it became about your image, your board, your interviews, the way people praised you for raising Sophie alone." Julian's eyes moved back to hers. "I never said I raised her alone." "You never corrected them. That is different. It was useful." He flinched. Nia continued, "You liked being admired for surviving what I was helping you survive. That is not fair. Was the threat still active? Julian's silence answered. Nia nodded. Leave the room. He did. The next morning, Theodore's attorney arrived with 3 assistants and several sealed boxes. His name was Malcolm Reed. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the patient expression of a man accustomed to wealthy families becoming unreasonable in expensive rooms. Malcolm asked that the formal dining room be prepared. He also gave one unusual instruction. The small wooden table from the kitchen must be brought in. Celeste stared at him. For what purpose? Mr. Mercer specified it. That table is for staff. Malcolm looked at her. I am aware of where it has been used. 2 members of the household staff carried the table into the formal dining room. They placed it near Theodore's chair. Nia watched from the doorway. The wood was worn along one edge. A small mark remained near the center, where Sophie had once pressed too hard with a yellow pencil. 6 years of Nia's life had happened around that table. Meals eaten after everyone else. Reports written after midnight. Promises made by Julian and broken before the plates were cleared. Malcolm noticed Nia looking at it. He said nothing. The will reading began shortly after noon. Julian sat in his usual place. Celeste sat near him. Miles appeared tense, though he kept checking his phone as if boredom explained it. Several relatives filled the remaining chairs. Nia stood near the wall. She had already packed the rest of her belongings. The ring Julian gave her lay on his dresser. When the will was finished, she intended to leave. Malcolm opened the first folder. Then he looked toward Nia. We cannot begin until Mrs. Mercer is seated. The room went still. Celeste frowned. Who? Malcolm spoke clearly. Mrs. Nia Mercer. Miles laughed once. That is not possible. Nia did not move. Malcolm pointed to Theodore's chair at the head of the table. Mr. Mercer directed that Mrs. Nia Mercer sit there during the reading. Celeste stood. She is an employee. Malcolm opened another folder. She is not an employee. She is Julian Mercer's wife. Every face turned toward Julian. Nia did not look at the relatives. She looked only at her husband. His face showed something worse than surprise. Fear. Malcolm placed a certified marriage document on the table. The courthouse date. Julian's signature. Nia's signature. The official seal. Celeste picked it up. You married her? Julian said nothing. Sophie, seated near the far end of the room, spoke calmly. I was there. Celeste looked at her. Sophie lifted her chin. I carried the flowers. Nia walked toward Theodore's chair. She sat. No one offered permission. For the first time in 6 years, she did not need it. Malcolm began with several charitable gifts. Property transfers. Trust distributions. Instructions regarding the Mercer Foundation. Then he opened a sealed envelope marked for direct reading. The following statement was recorded by Theodore Mercer 6 days before his death. An assistant placed a small speaker on the table. Theodore's voice filled the room. It sounded tired, but steady. If you are hearing this, then I have lost the opportunity to correct these matters in person. That is not an excuse. It is merely a fact. Nia's hands rested in her lap. Theodore continued. When my grandson informed me of his marriage to Nia Brooks, I responded with arrogance and prejudice. I assumed a woman without wealth must want his. I threatened Julian's position in the company and raised questions about Sophie's trust. Celeste looked toward Julian. Nia did not. 4 months later, Theodore's recording said, I withdrew those threats in full. The room changed. Nia turned slowly toward Julian. He did not meet her eyes. Malcolm removed a document from the folder. The withdrawal was issued in writing. Theodore continued. Julian received and acknowledged it personally. Malcolm placed the paper on the table. Julian's signature appeared at the bottom. His name, his handwriting, the date, 5 years and 8 months earlier. Nia stared at it. Every dinner returned at once. Every empty chair. Every night Julian touched the ring hidden beneath her clothes and promised the danger would end soon. Every time he said after, Nia stood. She walked toward him. Not quickly, not dramatically. She was still searching for one sentence that could keep the man she loved from becoming a stranger. "You knew?" Julian looked up at her. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you. When? I was waiting for the right time." Nia stared at him. "You had almost 6 years. No one moved." Theodore's recorded voice continued. "Julian allowed my original cruelty to become a shield for his own convenience. He benefited from the image of the devoted widower. He benefited from allowing investors to believe his success belonged to him alone. And he benefited from the intelligence of a wife he refused to name." Julian lowered his eyes. Nia returned to Theodore's chair. The recording moved to the supplier investigation. The evidence confirms that Miles Mercer used connected companies to overcharge Mercer properties and redirect funds for personal benefit. Miles pushed back from the table. "This is absurd." Malcolm spoke without looking at him. "The supporting evidence has been delivered to the appropriate authorities." Miles went pale. Theodore's voice continued. "The scheme was not discovered by Julian, his audit committee, or his executive team. It was discovered by Nia Brooks Mercer." The room became silent again. She traced the suppliers. She developed the restructuring plan. She protected the hotels, the employees, and the family fortune. Nia looked at Julian. He did not defend himself. He could not. The company has been surviving on the intelligence of a woman it would not allow at its table. Malcolm opened the final section of the will. He read slowly. "Theodore Mercer leaves 52% of the voting shares of Mercer International to Nia Brooks Mercer." Celeste stood so quickly her chair struck the floor. "No," Malcolm continued. "He also leaves her control of the Mercer Foundation and the remaining assets of his personal estate." Miles swore under his breath. Julian remained seated. Nia did not feel rich. She felt hollow. The room was full of people looking at her differently because a dead man had attached money to the worth they had refused to see while he was alive. Malcolm turned another page. "Julian Mercer retains his personal assets and all property held independently of Theodore Mercer's estate. He does not retain controlling authority over Mercer International." Then Malcolm looked toward the wooden kitchen table. "To Julian Mercer, Theodore leaves one item." An assistant turned the table slightly. A brass plate had been fixed beneath its edge. Malcolm read the inscription aloud. "A man who cannot give his wife a chair beside him is not fit to sit at the head of a table built by her sacrifice." Julian's face broke, not loudly, not in a way anyone else might have noticed, but Nia saw it. She knew every change in that face. For years, that had been part of her love. Celeste pointed toward Nia. "She planned this." Nia turned. Celeste's voice rose. "She stayed in this house, worked her way into Theodore's confidence, and waited for him to die." Malcolm opened one final file. Before marrying Julian Mercer, Nia Brooks signed a prenuptial agreement surrendering any claim to his personal fortune. He placed it beside the marriage certificate. She was not informed of the contents of Theodore's will. She did not request shares, property, or payment. Celeste's mouth closed. Malcolm looked toward Julian. Mr. Mercer was fully aware of the prenuptial agreement. Nia stood again. This time she did not walk toward Julian hoping to save anything. She walked toward him because she needed to say the truth where everybody could hear it. Julian rose. "Nia, I loved you." She looked at him. "I know." The answer surprised him. It surprised the room. Nia continued, "But you watched me become smaller so you could continue looking powerful." His eyes filled. She did not look away. "You did not protect me from your family. You protected yourself from having to defend me. Nia, you loved me in every room where loving me cost you nothing." The words landed harder than anger. Julian had no argument left. Nia looked around the table. At Celeste. At the relatives. At the people who had eaten meals she planned while refusing her a chair. "I accept the shares," she said, "not because suffering should be rewarded with money, and not because Theodore's will can return the years I lost." She placed one hand on the back of Theodore's chair. "I accept because my work helped build the value you all inherited. I will not refuse recognition simply because it arrived late." Then she turned to Malcolm. "Send all future company documents to my attorney." Julian stepped forward. "Where are you going?" "Away from you." "Nia, please." She stopped. "You asked me to wait 6 years." Her voice softened. "Now you will learn what waiting costs." She left the dining room. Sophie followed a few minutes later, carrying the yellow flower from the funeral. Nia met her in the front hall. They stood together quietly. "I am moving out," Nia said. Sophie nodded. Nia took her hand. "This does not change what you are to me. I know. And I am not asking you to choose between us. I know that too." Sophie placed the flower in Nia's hand. "You should take something yellow." Nia smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. She left the Mercer estate that afternoon. Now be honest. Did you see that coming? If the will caught you off guard, tap the like button and tell me in the comments. Because sometimes justice does not arrive as an apology. Sometimes it arrives as proof that the woman everybody overlooked was the one holding everything together. Nia moved into a quiet apartment overlooking the lake. Not a mansion. Not a penthouse. A place chosen because the light was good, and nobody inside it needed her permission to call her by her own name. Her first weeks as chairwoman were not easy. Several board members assumed Theodore had given her control out of guilt. Others expected her to fail quietly so they could persuade her to sell the shares. At her first meeting, one director spent 10 minutes explaining hotel operations to her. Nia listened. Then she opened a folder and corrected his numbers from memory. By the end of the meeting, nobody explained her own business to her again. She completed the investigation into Miles's supplier network. She canceled the fraudulent agreements. She protected the hotel workers from layoffs. She gave public credit to the loading managers, accounting assistants, cooks, cleaners, and junior employees whose warnings had been ignored. Then she created a return-to-work program for women whose careers had paused because they cared for sick parents, partners, or family members. She named it after her mother. Julian did not challenge the will. He resigned from the board. He held a press conference and admitted that Nia had discovered the supplier fraud and written the restructuring plan credited to him. He returned every award attached to that work. He also signed legal documents preserving Nia's place in Sophie's life without requiring Nia to remain married to him. He sent no jewelry, no flowers, no grand public declaration. For the first time, Julian repaired something without trying to control how quickly he would be forgiven. Almost a year passed. Nia saw Sophie regularly. Sometimes they had lunch. Sometimes they visited museums. Sometimes they sat at Nia's kitchen counter and argued about whether yellow could be considered a neutral color. Julian never used those visits to reach Nia. He waited. Not because waiting made him noble, because he had finally understood that Nia's time belonged to her. One autumn evening, the Mercer Foundation opened a community center on the South Side. The building offered career training, legal support, childcare services, and grants for women returning to work after caregiving. The opening dinner was held in a large hall. There was no head table, no servant's entrance, no private room for important people. Hotel executives sat beside kitchen workers. Board members sat beside volunteers. Everybody ate the same meal. Nia sat near the center of one long table. An empty chair remained beside her. Julian arrived late. He stood near the doorway in a simple dark suit. He did not walk toward the empty chair. He did not assume it belonged to him. Sophie looked at Nia. Nia looked across the room at Julian. Then she said, "You may sit." He approached slowly. "Are you sure?" "I am sure about dinner." He waited. Nia continued. "The rest will take longer." Julian nodded. "Then I will earn the rest one day at a time." He sat beside her, not at the head of the table. Not as the man whose name controlled the room, as a man being offered one honest beginning after years of hiding behind excuses. Nia did not return the wedding ring that night. She did not promise the marriage would survive. Love was still there, but she had learned that love was not the only question. The deeper question was whether love had become safe enough to live inside. Sophie placed 3 plates in front of them. Then she sat across the table and smiled. For the first time, nobody she loved had been sent away to eat alone. And that is the truth Nia carried out of that house. A love that requires you to disappear is not protecting you. Real love makes room for your full name, your voice, your work, and your chair. Now tell me honestly, would you have allowed Julian to sit beside you after what he did, or did he lose that right the moment he chose his image over his wife? Share this story with a woman who needs to remember that being patient does not mean she must accept being hidden. And subscribe to Consequential Stories with Benjamin for stories about a woman whose worth could not stay invisible forever.